There is a version of you that exists in the minds of other people, a constructed image built from every word you have spoken, every emotion you have shown, every weakness you have exposed, every secret you have shared in moments you believed were safe. And that version of you, the one living in the minds of everyone around you, is being used right now. Whether you are aware of it or not by enemies necessarily, not always by people who wish you harm, but by human nature itself. Because the moment another person receives information about you, that information stops belonging to you. It becomes a tool, a resource, a lens through which they filter every future interaction with you. And depending on what that information is, it can quietly dismantle everything you have spent years building. Most people understand danger in obvious forms. The betrayal they can see coming, the enemy who announces themselves, the threat that arrives with warning. What almost nobody prepares for is the slow, invisible erosion that happens through ordinary conversation, through casual sharing, through the natural human impulse to connect by revealing, through the moments where you opened your mouth and handed someone a key to a door you did not even know existed. The philosophers and strategists who understood power at its deepest level, Machiavelli, Sun Tzu, the Stoics, the architects of every lasting empire, shared one principle that cuts across all cultures and all centuries. The person who controls what others know about them controls the terms of every relationship they are in. And the person who reveals without strategy surrenders that control completely, usually without ever realizing what they have lost. This is not about becoming cold. It is not about becoming dishonest or disconnected or incapable of genuine relationship. It is about understanding something that the most powerful and protected people in history understood instinctively. Information about yourself is currency. And like any currency, how you spend it determines whether you accumulate power or drain it. There are 5 specific categories of personal information that, once revealed in the wrong context or to the wrong person, change the dynamic of every relationship they touch. Not dramatically, not overnight, but steadily, invisibly, irreversibly. And by the time you notice the shift, the information has already done its work. These are not the 5 things people typically warn you about, not the obvious ones. Not simply do not share your passwords or do not tell strangers where you live. These are deeper, more psychological, more specifically dangerous because they feel harmless, even virtuous, to share. They feel like connection, like trust, like authenticity. And that feeling is exactly what makes them so consistently destructive in the wrong hands. The first thing you should never reveal is the full architecture of your ambitions, not your general goals, not the surface-level aspirations that everyone can see you working toward. The deep architecture, the specific vision, the precise destination you are moving toward, and the exact route you have planned to get there. The thing that keeps you awake at night not with anxiety, but with the particular alertness of a person who can see a future that does not yet exist and is working in private to build it. Most people share this freely. They share it because ambition is exciting to talk about, because articulating a vision makes it feel more real, because the natural impulse when you can see something others cannot see yet is to describe it, to share the image, to find someone who will look where you are pointing and confirm that what you see is actually there. And in the right relationship, with the right person, at the right time, this sharing is not only acceptable but necessary. Deep trust is partly built from shared vision. But in the wrong context, which is most contexts, revealing the full architecture of your ambitions does something very specific and very damaging. It activates the comparative instinct in the people around you. Human beings are fundamentally competitive creatures, not always consciously, not always maliciously, but the moment someone understands precisely what you are moving toward, something shifts in how they relate to you. They begin to evaluate their own position relative to your projected future position. And depending on that evaluation, one of several things happens. Some people begin to subtly undermine you, not out of hatred, but out of the unconscious drive to protect their own relative standing. Some people begin to extract information from you about your plans that they then use for their own purposes. Some people who might have been valuable allies begin to see you as competition rather than as someone worth supporting. And some people simply begin treating you differently, with a guardedness that was not there before, because your revealed ambition has introduced a new variable into their calculation of the relationship. The deeper problem is something the Stoics understood, and modern psychology has confirmed. When you articulate a goal publicly, the brain receives a fraction of the reward it would have received from actually achieving the goal. The social acknowledgement of the ambition produces a dopamine response similar to the dopamine response produced by actual accomplishment, and that chemical reward reduces the internal drive that would otherwise push you toward the work. You have spent the motivation before doing the thing. The most dangerous people in any field are the ones whose ambitions you cannot read, who work in a direction that only becomes clear when they arrive, who do not describe the destination because they understand that the silence around their movement is itself a form of protection. By the time the world understands what they were building, it is built. The time for interference has passed. Reveal the work, reveal the results. Keep the full architecture of where you are going sealed until the going is done. The second thing you should never reveal is the depth and detail of your personal struggles. This one will feel uncomfortable to read because everything in modern culture pushes against it. Vulnerability is celebrated. Sharing your struggles is reframed as strength. Openness about pain is marketed as healing. And there is genuine truth in all of this, within specific contexts, in relationships of proven trust, in therapeutic environments, in communities built specifically around mutual support. But in the broader social world, in the workplace, in the general landscape of your relationships, there is a brutal and largely unspoken truth about what happens when you reveal the depth of your personal struggles to people who have not earned that information. They remember. Long after you have moved through the struggle and emerged on the other side, long after the thing you were fighting has been resolved, it lives in the minds of everyone you told about it. And it colors their perception of you in ways that are extraordinarily difficult to reverse. This is not because people are cruel. It is because of how human memory and social categorization work. When you tell someone about a struggle you are experiencing, particularly an ongoing one, you become associated with that struggle in their mental model of you. The struggle becomes part of your identity as they understand it, and identity categories, once established, resist updating, even when the external facts change completely. The colleague who knew you during a period of financial difficulty will continue to process you through that lens long after your financial situation has transformed. The friend who witnessed your emotional breakdown during a relationship collapse will carry a version of you that is perpetually fragile into every subsequent interaction, even years later when that fragility has evolved into genuine strength. The professional contact who knows the details of your health crisis will forever see you partly through the filter of that vulnerability, with a compassion perhaps, but also with an unconscious recalibration of your perceived capability. There is also a more direct and less sympathetic dynamic that operates in competitive environments. Revealed struggles are leverage, not always used consciously, not always used immediately, but stored, remembered, and capable of being deployed in moments of conflict or competition in ways that are very difficult to anticipate and nearly impossible to defend against, because the person using them can always claim they are simply acknowledging known reality. The person who knows your financial pressure can lowball an offer and justify it as simply knowing where you stand. The person who knows your emotional vulnerabilities can apply precisely calibrated pressure in negotiations or conflicts. The person who knows your professional insecurities can undermine you in exactly the ways that will land hardest. They did not create these weapons. You handed them over freely in a moment of connection that felt safe. Process your struggles. Work through them. Find the genuine support you need in relationships that have been tested and proven over time. But in the broader social world, present the result of having navigated difficulty rather than the difficulty itself. Let people see the strength that emerged from the fire. There is no need to show them the fire. The third thing you should never reveal is your contempt, even when it is deserved. Every person alive has people in their life for whom they hold some degree of private contempt. The incompetent superior, the dishonest colleague, the person in your social circle who takes without giving, who performs without substance, who has arrived at their position through manipulation rather than merit. You know who they are, and in certain private moments, perhaps with a trusted friend or in the silence of your own thoughts, you allow yourself to feel exactly what you feel about them. That is human, that is honest, that is fine. What is not fine strategically is allowing that contempt to surface in observable ways in the presence of anyone outside your most trusted inner circle. Machiavelli was absolutely explicit about this. He wrote that a prince must never make enemies unnecessarily, and the most unnecessary enemies a person can make are the ones created not through conflict of interest but through revealed opinion, through the careless moment where contempt slipped through the carefully maintained surface of professional courtesy, through the unguarded comment that traveled back to its subject, through the expression that crossed your face for a fraction of a second in a room where someone was watching more carefully than you realized. Here is what revealed contempt does. It does not simply create an enemy in the person you have expressed contempt for, though it reliably does that. It signals to everyone who witnessed the expression that you are capable of this, that you make these evaluations, that you hold these private judgments, and it makes every person in proximity ask the same question silently. What does he think of me when I am not in the room? That question, once planted, erodes trust in ways that are nearly irreversible because they are invisible. People will not tell you they are now wondering about your private opinion of them. They will simply become slightly more guarded, slightly less forthcoming, slightly less inclined to advocate for you, support you, or include you in conversations and opportunities where advocacy and support are distributed. You have not made one enemy. You have made many people uncertain about whether they are an enemy, and uncertain people behave defensively. The practical rule is this: disagree privately with everyone you need to disagree with. Reserve genuine contempt for your own internal experience where it belongs. In every external interaction, present the version of yourself that is capable of professional respect regardless of private opinion. Not because the people around you necessarily deserve it, because you deserve the strategic advantage of being perceived as someone who never lets private judgment contaminate public behavior. That perception is rarer and more powerful than most people realize, because most people cannot do it. Most people leak, and the person who never leaks becomes a different category of player in every environment they inhabit. They become someone it is not safe to underestimate and not useful to provoke, because they give nothing away. And the person who gives nothing away holds all the cards. The fourth thing you should never reveal is the precise nature of your fears. Not fears in the dramatic sense, not phobias or irrational anxieties, though those apply too. The deeper category of fear that is the real strategic vulnerability, the specific things that could genuinely derail you, the outcomes you are most working to avoid, the losses that would actually reach you at the level where you are most essentially yourself. Every human being has these: the fear of irrelevance, the fear of being exposed as less capable than you have appeared, the fear of financial collapse and what it would mean for your identity and your relationships, the fear of being alone in the particular way that has haunted you since long before you could name it, the fear of failing at the specific thing you have staked your sense of self on. These fears are not weaknesses in any absolute sense. They are simply the places where the investment is highest, where the stakes are real, where the outcome matters beyond calculation. But they are also maps, and in the wrong hands, a map to your deepest fears is the most precise instrument of influence or destruction that another person can possess. Because once someone knows what you are most afraid of, they do not need to threaten you directly. They do not need to act at all. The simple awareness that someone knows creates a kind of internal surveillance that begins to shape your behavior automatically. You will unconsciously make decisions designed to prevent that fear from being activated, rather than decisions designed to move you toward what you actually want. You will negotiate from a position of concealed desperation rather than genuine choice. You will make concessions that have nothing to do with the stated terms of the interaction and everything to do with the private terror that the other person has access to. This is how the most sophisticated forms of leverage operate, not through explicit threat, but through implicit awareness. The person who knows your fear does not need to name it. Simply being in a room with someone who possesses that knowledge is enough to shift the dynamic. And the shift happens inside you. invisibly in the place where the fear lives, before your rational mind has even processed what is happening. The discipline here is twofold. First, know your own fears with precision. The person who has not mapped their own deepest fears cannot protect them. You cannot guard a border you do not know exists. And second, share those fears only with people whose interests are so completely aligned with yours that the information could never be turned against you. Not because people are necessarily malicious, because situations change, alliances shift. The person who was completely safe with your most essential vulnerabilities last year may be in a very different relationship with you this year, and the information does not disappear when the relationship changes. It remains, waiting in the new context, under the new terms. The fifth thing you should never reveal is your next move before you make it. This applies in business, in negotiation, in career advancement, in creative work, in relationships, in any domain where the outcome of a decision or action depends even partially on how others respond to it. There is a particular kind of person who announces their next move before making it, who describes the plan in detail before executing it, who cannot contain the excitement of a coming decision and shares it in the anticipation phase rather than after the fact. This is an extremely common behavior. It feels like enthusiasm. It feels like transparency. It feels like the natural expression of a mind fully engaged with what it is building. And it is strategically catastrophic. Here is why. Every move you have not yet made exists in a state of pure potential. It has not encountered the resistance of reality yet. It has not been subject to the friction of opposition, of competing interests, of the 1,000 variables that will determine whether it succeeds or fails. In this state of potential, it is maximally powerful. It can go anywhere. It can be adjusted in response to anything. It retains complete flexibility. The moment you announce it, everything changes. First, you invite opposition that would not otherwise have mobilized. People who would have had no reaction to your completed move often have very strong reactions to your announced intentions, because intentions can still be stopped, and people who are threatened by your direction will work to stop them in ways they could not work to reverse an accomplished fact. Second, you invite input that will complicate and slow your execution. People will offer opinions, concerns, alternative suggestions, all of which will need to be managed and none of which would have been offered if the move had simply appeared complete. Because complete facts invite a different response than announced intentions. Complete facts are evaluated. Announced intentions are negotiated. Third, and most significantly, you surrender the psychological advantage of unpredictability. The person who cannot be anticipated is the person who is hardest to counter, hardest to control, and most consistently able to shape outcomes on their own terms. Sun Tzu built an entire philosophy of military strategy on this principle. Machiavelli articulated it in terms of political survival. The most effective operators in every field from business to diplomacy to creative work have practiced it instinctively. Do not speak of what you plan to do. Speak of what you have done. Let the completed move speak for itself. Let the results of your next step be the announcement of the step. Because an accomplished fact in your favor creates a completely different negotiating reality than an announced intention. The accomplished fact exists. It must be dealt with as it is. The announced intention is still theoretical. And theoretical things can be undone, redirected, undermined, and stolen. There is something else operating here that goes beyond strategy into the psychology of your own relationship with your goals. When you announce a next move before making it, you introduce external judgment into the space between intention and action. And external judgment is one of the most reliable killers of forward momentum that exists. Not because the judgment is necessarily negative, because even positive external judgment, the enthusiastic encouragement of people who think your plan is brilliant, creates an external audience for your process. And the presence of an external audience changes the internal experience of doing the work. You stop doing it purely for the result, you start doing it partly for the audience. And that split in motivation introduces a subtle but consistent inefficiency into everything you do. You make decisions that are better for the narrative of what you are doing rather than purely for the outcome. You avoid pivots that would be strategically correct because pivoting publicly feels like failure. You become attached to the announced plan rather than genuinely responsive to the evolving reality. The person who keeps their next move sealed until it is executed is free from all of this. They are accountable only to reality and to their own judgment. They can adjust without the weight of public commitment. They can change direction without managing the perception of change. They can fail quietly, learn completely, and return with a new move that no one saw coming and no one had time to prepare for. This is the operating principle of the most effective players in every domain. Not secrecy for its own sake, not opacity as a personality trait, but the disciplined understanding that the space between intention and execution is sacred, that what happens in that space is the real work, and that the real work is protected by silence the way that seeds are protected by soil. Not hidden, incubating. Now let us look at what connects all 5 of these categories, because there is a single underlying principle that makes each of them dangerous to reveal and powerful to protect. Each of these 5 things, your deepest ambitions, your personal struggles, your private contempt, your specific fears, and your next moves, represents a form of access to the interior of who you are, to the private operating system beneath the public interface. And access to the interior of a person is the most powerful form of leverage that exists in human relationships. Not financial leverage, not positional leverage, not the leverage of threat or reward, the leverage of understanding, of knowing how someone actually works beneath the performance, beneath the composed exterior, beneath the careful presentation of who they have decided to be. Once someone has that access, the dynamic of the relationship shifts permanently, not always into exploitation, not always into anything dramatic or visible, but into a new configuration where the person with interior access has a form of influence that the person without interior access cannot match because they are playing with more information. They can see around corners that you cannot see around because they have your map and you do not have theirs. The principle that all 5 of these rules protect is simply this: asymmetry of information creates asymmetry of power. The person who knows more about you than you know about them holds a structural advantage in every interaction, every negotiation, every conflict, and every collaboration you will ever have. Protecting these 5 categories does not mean becoming closed. It does not mean abandoning the capacity for genuine connection or the willingness to trust. It means being intentional about what access you grant, to whom, under what circumstances, and at what stage of a relationship's proven trustworthiness. The most powerful people you will ever encounter are not the ones who are most open. They are the ones who are most selective, who have learned, usually through some version of painful experience, that information about themselves is currency, that like any currency, it has value only when it is not given away indiscriminately, and that the relationships worth having are the ones where the exchange, when it finally happens, is both chosen and deserved. Genuine intimacy requires genuine vulnerability. Genuine trust requires genuine disclosure. The point is not to eliminate these things from your life. The point is to reserve them for the relationships and contexts that are genuinely worthy of them, and to recognize that in every other context, the composed, protected, deliberately curated version of yourself is not a mask over the real you. It is the real you, making a real choice about what belongs to you and what belongs to the world. Most people never learn this. They move through their lives bleeding information, handing keys to doors they cannot afford to have opened, confusing transparency with virtue and revelation with connection. And they wonder why the people around them seem to hold advantages they cannot explain, why negotiations seem to go against them in ways they did not anticipate, why the relationships they invest in most heavily so often return the least, why they feel exposed in environments where they have tried hardest to be genuine. The answer in almost every case is the same. They gave access they did not need to give, to people who did not need to have it, in moments that felt like connection, but functioned as extraction. You cannot take that information back. You cannot unreveal what has been revealed. The only move available once the access has been granted is to begin, from this moment, managing what you grant going forward. To start treating information about yourself the way the most powerful and protected people in history have always treated it, as something that belongs entirely to you until you consciously, deliberately, and strategically decide otherwise. 5 things. 5 categories of interior access that carry the full weight of your vulnerability. 5 doors that once opened cannot be closed. Your ambitions in their full architecture, your struggles in their full depth, your contempt in its honest completeness, your fears in their specific reality, your next move before it becomes a completed fact. Keep these sealed, not forever, not from everyone, but by default, until the relationship has demonstrated, through time and evidence and tested loyalty, that it has earned the access. That demonstration takes longer than you think. Trust your instincts less than you currently do, and your track record of past disclosures more. Because the patterns are there if you look at them honestly. The moments where you revealed too much, too soon, to someone who had not yet proven themselves trustworthy, followed by the quiet shift in the dynamic that you noticed but could not explain. You understand now what that shift was. You understand what moved in the room when the information left your hands. The question is only what you will do with that understanding from here.